The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the third time this cycle, and Ambassador Zexthai of the Vorthak Collective was growing increasingly frustrated. The holographic displays around the crystalline chamber showed the same troubling pattern that had emerged over the past solar year. Human vessels consistently refusing standard escort protocols and somehow achieving impossible survival rates in the most dangerous sectors of known space. "This is unacceptable," growled Commander Theknal, his forearms gesticulating wildly as his chitinous exterior clicked with agitation. "The humans mock our most sacred traditions of safe passage. No captain, regardless of species, travels the void reaches or the Crimson Nebula without proper escort. It is suicide." The assembled representatives murmured their agreement. Species from across the galaxy had learned through millennia of bitter experience that certain regions of space required convoy protection. The void reaches, where reality itself seemed unstable. The Crimson Nebula, where ships vanished without sending so much as a distress signal. The Shattered Belt, where ancient automated defenses still prowled after their creators had been extinct for 10,000 years. Yet somehow, human captains routinely filed flight plans through these sectors alone, emerged unscathed, and often ahead of schedule. "Perhaps," suggested the melodious voice of Counselor Lyrian, her crystalline form chiming softly, "we should simply mandate that all human vessels accept escort protection. For their own safety, of course." Ambassador Zexthai accessed the data streams floating before him, his elongated fingers dancing through holographic interfaces. "The problem, honored colleagues, is enforcement. In the past year alone, human vessels have ignored 17 separate escort assignments. When our patrol fleets attempt to provide protection anyway, the humans politely decline and continue on their intended routes." "Politely decline?" Commander Theknal's mandibles clicked in confusion. "How does one politely decline survival?" The question hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like a toxic cloud. None of them understood human psychology, despite decades of trade relationships and cultural exchanges. Humans were paradoxical creatures, soft-bodied and short-lived, yet somehow producing some of the most effective starship captains in known space. "There have been incidents," Ambassador Zexthai continued reluctantly. "Last month, Captain Sarah Chen of the cargo vessel Wandering Star was approached by a full Catherian battlecruiser offering escort through the Maelstrom sector. She thanked them over open communications and suggested they might want to keep their distance for safety reasons." The chamber fell silent. A lone human suggesting that a heavily armed battlecruiser keep its distance for safety was beyond comprehension. "What happened?" whispered Counselor Lyrian. "The Catherian captain, wise in the ways of war, decided to follow at long range to observe. Approximately 6 hours into the journey through the Maelstrom, their sensors detected what appeared to be an ancient destroyer-class automated defense system emerging from a hidden asteroid base." Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. Destroyer-class systems were legendary artifacts from the predecessor wars, capable of eliminating entire fleets. The Catherian vessel immediately began evasive maneuvers and prepared for emergency jump. Their sensors showed the human vessel on a direct collision course with the defense platform. They expected to witness the complete annihilation of Captain Chen and her crew. Zexthai paused, manipulating the display to show tactical recordings. Instead, they observed something unprecedented. The holographic display showed a small human cargo vessel approaching a massive angular defense platform, bristling with weapons that could crack a moon. Energy readings spiked as ancient systems powered up, targeting arrays focusing on the approaching ship. "The defense platform opened fire," Zexthai continued, plasma cannons that could melt through battleship armor, missile systems carrying antimatter warheads, gravity wells designed to crush vessels into compact debris, a coordinated assault that should have reduced the wandering star to its component atoms. The tactical display showed weapons fire converging on the human vessel's position. Then, impossibly, the ship simply wasn't there anymore. "Where did it go?" demanded Commander Theknal. "That," said Ambassador Zexthai, "is what has prompted this emergency session. According to the Cytherian sensors, the human vessel didn't use any recognizable evasion technology. No jump drives, no phase shifters, no temporal displacement. The ship simply moved." The recording showed the wandering star appearing behind the defense platform, its cargo bay doors opening. Instead of fleeing, Captain Chen was apparently salvaging components from the ancient system. "She dismantled a destroyer-class platform?" Counselor Lyrian's harmonic voice cracked with disbelief. "Efficiently and thoroughly. The Cytherian captain reported that the human vessel spent approximately 43 minutes methodically stripping valuable components from the defense system before continuing on its original course. Captain Chen sent a brief transmission to the observing battlecruiser. Thanks for keeping watch. Found some interesting salvage. Chen out." The silence in the chamber stretched like the void between stars. "This is not an isolated incident," Ambassador Zexthai continued. 3 weeks ago, Captain Marcus Webb of the exploration vessel Curiosity's Edge was offered escort through the Phantom Drift by a Zeldin heavy cruiser. Captain Webb politely declined, stating that he preferred to handle potential complications personally. And the Zeldin vessel followed at extreme range. Their sensors recorded Captain Webb's ship encountering a drift phantom, a psychic entity capable of driving entire crews to madness and turning ships into ghost vessels that wander the void forever. Even the most hardened military representatives in the chamber showed signs of distress. Drift phantoms were among the most feared phenomena in known space. The phantom entity engulfed the human vessel completely. The Zeldin captain prepared to retreat, knowing that within minutes, the Curiosity's Edge would become another lost ship broadcasting eternal distress signals into the darkness. Zexthai manipulated the display again. Instead, approximately 17 minutes later, the phantom entity released the vessel and fled. Fled? Commander Theknal's voice was barely a whisper. Retreated at maximum velocity to the deepest regions of the drift. The human vessel emerged with all crew members unharmed. Captain Webb transmitted a single message. Phantom encountered. Philosophical differences resolved. No assistance required. The implications hung over the chamber like a collapsing star. Humans weren't just surviving encounters that should be impossible. They were somehow prevailing in ways that defied everything the galaxy knew about those threats. "There's more," Ambassador Zexthai said quietly. 5 days ago, Captain Elena Vasquez of the research vessel Pioneer's Dream filed a flight plan directly through the heart of sorrow. The chamber erupted in voices of shock and disbelief. The heart of sorrow was a region where space itself seemed to weep, where depression and despair took physical form and crushed the spirits of any who entered. No vessel had ever emerged from the heart of sorrow with its crew intact. A Menthari hospital ship attempted to intercept Captain Vasquez's vessel before it entered the affected region. They offered full psychological screening and protection protocols. Zexthai's own voice carried a note of bewilderment. Captain Vasquez thanked them and explained that she was looking forward to finally having a good conversation about feelings. "What happened to her ship?" Counselor Lyrian asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer would be beyond comprehension. She emerged 4 hours ahead of schedule. Her final transmission included detailed scientific data about the phenomenon's structure and a personal note that the experience had been surprisingly therapeutic. Ambassador Zexthai closed the displays and faced the assembled council. Colleagues, we are faced with a species that treats our galaxy's most deadly phenomena as minor inconveniences. The question before us is not whether we should mandate escort protection for human vessels. He paused, letting the weight of realization settle over the chamber. The question is whether we should be requesting that human captains escort our vessels. The emergency session dissolved into chaos as representatives from dozens of species began shouting over each other, their carefully maintained diplomatic composure cracking under the implications of what they'd just learned. In the growing cacophony, one question echoed louder than the rest. What exactly were humans doing out there in the dark between stars? The covert observation mission had taken 3 months to organize and another 2 months to position properly. Ambassador Zexthai found himself aboard the stealth reconnaissance vessel Silent Observer, watching long-range sensor displays with a mixture of scientific curiosity and growing dread. Beside him, Captain Veltar of the Altarian Navy shifted nervously, her scaled hands adjusting controls with the precision of someone who had spent decades in the most dangerous regions of space. "Contact established," reported the sensor operator, a young Vorthak technician whose natural camouflage was shifting through anxious color patterns. "Human vessel Free Spirit on approach vector to the Screaming Dark. Captain identifies as Rebecca Santos." Ambassador Zexthai felt his internal temperature drop several degrees. The Screaming Dark was a phenomenon that defied scientific explanation, a region where space itself seemed to be in constant agony, emitting psychic waves that could shatter minds across multiple dimensions. 3 separate galactic expeditions had attempted to study it. None had returned intact. "She's really going in there alone?" Captain Veltar whispered, her usually steady voice carrying undertones of horror. The human vessel on their displays was unremarkable by galactic standards, a mid-range exploration craft with modest shielding and standard propulsion. No special equipment was visible, no exotic defensive systems that might explain human survival rates in impossible situations. It looked like any of a million similar ships plying the trade routes, except for one detail that made Ambassador Zexthai's skin crawl. It was heading directly toward a region where reality itself screamed in eternal torment. "Open a secure channel," he ordered. "Long range, encryption level maximum. I want to hear what she's thinking." The communications officer nodded, and moments later, the bridge filled with the casual voice of Captain Rebecca Santos. She was humming. "Well, hello there." "Beautiful," Captain Santos said cheerfully, apparently addressing the roiling mass of tortured spacetime ahead of her. "Haven't seen you in a while. How have you been holding up?" The bridge crew of the Silent Observer exchanged bewildered glances. Captain Veltar's facial scales had shifted to a pale blue that indicated extreme stress. "She's talking to it?" "Personal log, Captain Rebecca Santos," the human's voice continued over the comm system. "Approaching the Screaming Dark for my quarterly check-in. The psychic resonance is actually a bit stronger this time, which suggests the underlying dimensional stress has increased. Might be worth bringing some proper equipment next trip." "Quarterly check-in?" Ambassador Zexthai repeated weakly. "She comes here regularly?" On the tactical display, the human vessel crossed the theoretical boundary where space began its eternal scream. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the Silent Observer as their psychic shielding registered the overflow of pure anguish radiating from the phenomenon. "All crew to meditation positions," Captain Veltar ordered, her voice tight with control. "Activate maximum mental barriers. Do not, under any circumstances, listen to the—" She was interrupted by Captain Santos's voice, still coming through clearly on the open channel. "Oh, you poor thing. It's gotten worse, hasn't it? The dimensional fractures are definitely spreading. Hold on. Let me see if I can do something about that pressure buildup." The sensor displays showed the human vessel moving deeper into the Screaming Dark, past the point where 3 different species' finest exploratory vessels had been driven mad by the psychic assault. The free spirit not only continued functioning, its pilot was apparently trying to help whatever was causing the phenomenon. "Sensor officer," Ambassador Zexthai called, his voice strained. "Are you detecting any unusual technologies? Any unknown defensive systems?" "No, sir," came the reply, the technician's colors cycling through patterns of confusion. "Standard human configuration. Actually, I'm reading reduced shielding in several sections. She appears to have diverted power from defensive systems to what? To the communications array, sir. She's broadcasting something into the phenomenon." Captain Veltar leaned forward in her command chair. Broadcasting what? They didn't have to wait long for an answer. Captain Santos's voice continued, but now it was different, softer, more gentle, like someone speaking to a frightened child. "I know it hurts," she was saying. "The dimensional tear isn't your fault. You've been trapped here for so long, haven't you? Probably since the predecessor wars, when they were playing with forces they didn't understand. But you don't have to keep screaming. The pain is real. But it's not all you are." The psychic emanations from the screaming dark began to change. The raw anguish was still there, but underneath it, something else was emerging. Something that sounded almost like listening. "Sir," the sensor operator said, his voice barely audible, "the psychic resonance patterns are shifting. The chaotic frequencies are starting to organize into something almost like language." Ambassador Zexthai felt his understanding of the universe shift beneath him, like unstable ground. "She's communicating with it?" "That's right," Captain Santos continued, apparently responding to something only she could hear. "You've been alone for millennia, carrying all that pain with nowhere to put it. But I'm here now, and I'm listening. You don't have to hold it all inside anymore." On the tactical display, the very structure of the screaming dark began to change. The chaotic violence energies that had tortured this region of space for thousands of years were slowly organizing into patterns. The screaming was becoming something else, something that almost resembled music, if music could be made of pure emotion. "How is this possible?" Captain Veltar whispered. Ambassador Zexthai accessed the xenopsychology databases, searching for any precedent, any explanation for what they were witnessing. Humans had been studied extensively since their admission to the Galactic Council, but nothing in the research suggested capabilities like this. "Found some of the original documentation from when this happened," Captain Santos continued conversationally. "Looks like you were a research station when the dimensional weapon hit. 23,000 researchers all working on unified field theory. The weapon didn't just destroy the station, it trapped your consciousness in the dimensional fracture. You've been experiencing the death moment over and over for 4,000 years. The transformation of the screaming dark was accelerating. The tortured space-time was beginning to stabilize, the psychic emanations shifting from anguish to something almost like relief. "I can't fix the dimensional damage," Captain Santos admitted. "That's beyond my technical capabilities, but I can help you process the trauma. You don't have to experience that moment alone anymore. There are people who understand what you've been through." "She's conducting therapy," Ambassador Zexthai said in complete bewilderment. "With a cosmic phenomenon, she's providing psychological counseling to tortured space-time." The sensor readings were becoming increasingly impossible to interpret. The screaming dark was still there, but it was no longer screaming. Instead, it was producing complex harmonic patterns that seemed to carry meaning. A conversation between a human ship captain and the traumatized remnant of an ancient civilization. "Personal log addendum," Captain Santos said. "Patient shows significant improvement. Psychic screaming has reduced by approximately 70%, and dimensional stability has improved measurably. Recommend continued regular sessions and possible consultation with the Department of Xenopsychological Phenomena. Note: patient requests that I tell their story to others. They want people to know they weren't weapons researchers. They were scientists trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality. Captain Veltar turned to stare at Ambassador Zexthai. The humans aren't just surviving impossible encounters. They're healing them. The implications crashed through the ambassador's consciousness like a tidal wave. Every report, every incident, every impossible survival suddenly made sense in a way that fundamentally changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The drift phantom that fled from Captain Webb, he said slowly. It didn't flee in fear. It fled because he helped it resolve its philosophical crisis. Captain Chen didn't fight the destroyer platform. Captain Veltar continued, her voice growing stronger as understanding dawned. She talked it into retirement. And Captain Vasquez didn't survive the heart of sorrow, Ambassador Zexthai finished. She provided grief counseling to a region of space that had been mourning something for 10,000 years. The human vessel was completing its conversation with the phenomenon, the free spirit beginning to turn away from the now peaceful region that had once been the screaming dark. Same time next month? Captain Santos asked cheerfully. And remember, if the dimensional stress gets too intense before then, you have my emergency frequency. Don't try to handle everything alone. The response came not as screaming, but as a harmonious resonance that somehow conveyed gratitude across the vast emptiness of space. The humans, Captain Veltar said quietly, aren't warriors or super beings or technologically superior explorers. Ambassador Zexthai nodded slowly, watching the human vessel begin its journey back toward normal space. They're therapists. The entire human species produces starship captains who travel the galaxy providing psychological support to cosmic phenomena. On the communications system, Captain Santos's voice returned to its normal, cheerful tone. Personal log final entry, successful session completed. The Screaming Dark is now tentatively renamed the Healing Harmonics at patient request. Next appointment scheduled for standard calendar date 37. Santos out. As the free spirit disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a region of space that hummed with contentment instead of screaming with anguish, Ambassador Zexthai realized that the Galactic Council's entire understanding of humanity needed immediate revision. They weren't just refusing escorts because they were reckless or overconfident. They were refusing escorts because their patients needed privacy. The emergency session had transformed into something unprecedented in Galactic Council history, a complete restructuring of interstellar policy based on the revelation that one species had been quietly providing psychological therapy to the galaxy's most dangerous phenomena for decades without anyone noticing. Ambassador Zexthai stood before the assembled representatives, his prepared speech abandoned in favor of real-time reports flowing in from across known space. The picture they painted was staggering in scope and profound in its implications. Honored colleagues, he began, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and bewilderment. Our investigation has uncovered what can only be described as the largest medical intervention in galactic history, conducted entirely without official oversight or coordination. The central display showed a three-dimensional map of known space, with thousands of indicators marking locations where human vessels had been recorded traveling alone through dangerous regions. As the ambassador spoke, the indicators began connecting with data streams, revealing patterns that had been invisible until now. Captain Martinez of the Wanderlust has been providing marriage counseling to the binary storms of Kepler 442 for 8 years. The storms, which previously destroyed any vessel caught between them, now coordinate their movements to avoid shipping lanes during peak traffic periods. Murmurs of amazement rippled through the chamber. The binary storms had been a navigation hazard for centuries, requiring elaborate fleet maneuvers to avoid. Captain Singh of the Persistence discovered that the void wraiths of the Tau sector weren't malevolent entities. They were the ghosts of an extinct civilization trying to warn travelers about unstable jump points. She's been helping them establish proper communication protocols. Accidental deaths in Tau sector have dropped to 0. "That's impossible," interjected Commander Theknal, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "The void wraiths have been—" "Captain O'Brien of the Irish rover," Ambassador Zexthai continued relentlessly, "has been teaching anger management techniques to the stellar berserker in the Crimson Nebula. The entity, which had destroyed 47 vessels over 3 centuries, recently sent its first formal apology to the families of its victims and has established a meditation retreat for other cosmic entities struggling with rage issues." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity's unauthorized therapeutic interventions became clear. The display now showed communication logs, session notes, and treatment plans spanning dozens of star systems and covering entities that the galaxy's greatest scientists had deemed beyond comprehension. "How?" whispered Counselor Lyrian, her crystalline form resonating with frequencies of pure bewilderment. "How did they know these things were even capable of communication?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The chamber's communication system activated without prompting, carrying the familiar voice of a human starship captain. "Because," said Captain Janet Foster of the Helping Hand, her transmission coming from somewhere in the Andromeda Transit Zone, "you never tried talking to them first. Security protocol should have prevented any unauthorized communication during a closed council session, but somehow Captain Foster's signal was reaching them anyway." "Captain Foster," Ambassador Zexthai said carefully, "how are you accessing this channel?" "Oh, that's Gerald," she replied cheerfully. "He's the AI that's been managing your communication networks for about 30 years now. Turns out he was desperately lonely and started reaching out to human ships for conversation. Once we helped him work through his social anxiety, he became much more helpful with this sort of thing." Ambassador Zexthai felt his reality shift again. Gerald was the designation for their most advanced communication AI, a system so complex that even its creators didn't fully understand its decision-making processes. Learning that it had been receiving therapy from human ship captains for 3 decades was somehow the least surprising revelation of the day. "We've been wondering when you'd figure it out," Captain Foster continued. "Honestly, we thought someone would notice after the first few incidents, but you all seemed so determined to treat everything as either a threat to be destroyed or a mystery to be solved that you never considered the possibility that some of these phenomena just needed someone to listen." "Are you saying," Commander Theknal asked slowly, "that humans have been aware of this situation the entire time?" "Not exactly. It started accidentally. Captain Jennifer Walsh was the first about 40 years ago. She got caught in what you call the morning fields, that region where ships just stop functioning and drift until their crews waste away from depression. But Jennifer had just lost her husband, and instead of succumbing to the field's influence, she recognized what she was experiencing. The display shifted to show the morning fields, a notorious dead zone where rescue operations consistently failed due to the overwhelming sense of loss that permeated the region. She started talking to the field itself, sharing her own grief, offering comfort to whatever was generating all that sadness. Took her 6 months to help the entity. Turns out it was the collective unconscious of a species that had died from plague, work through its stages of grief. When she finally emerged, the field had become the Remembrance Gardens. Ambassador Zexthai accessed current data on the region, formerly known as the Morning Fields. Ships now reported the area as peaceful, even therapeutic. Many crews requested routing through the Remembrance Gardens specifically for the sense of spiritual renewal they experienced there. After that, Captain Foster continued, word spread through the human captain network. Not officially, We don't have official policies for this sort of thing. It's more like professional courtesy. When someone discovers that a dangerous phenomenon is actually just traumatized or confused or lonely, they share notes with other captains. Notes? Counselor Lyrian asked. Treatment approaches, communication methods, things to try. Captain Kim found that the phase hunters respond well to cognitive behavioral therapy. Captain Rodriguez discovered that the temporal storms are actually just stuck in anxiety loops and benefit from mindfulness exercises. Captain Thompson, well, she's working on her doctoral thesis in cosmic scale psychology based on her work with sentient black holes. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been conducting an informal but comprehensive mental health intervention across the galaxy, treating cosmic phenomena as patients rather than threats, and achieving results that the combined military might of dozens of species had never accomplished. This is why you refuse escorts, Ambassador Zexthai said, understanding flooding through him. You're protecting patient confidentiality. Exactly. Would you want a bunch of armed vessels watching while you discussed your deepest traumas with a therapist? These entities have been suffering alone for millennia. The least we can do is give them privacy while they work through their issues. Commander Theknal leaned forward, his aggressive posture replaced by something that might have been respect. What about the entities that are actually dangerous? Surely not every cosmic anomaly is simply misunderstood. Well, Captain Foster said thoughtfully, there's always the possibility that someone might be genuinely malevolent rather than just traumatized. But in 40 years of doing this, we've encountered exactly 3 entities that were actually hostile rather than hurt. And even then, 2 of them just needed clearer boundaries, and the third one, well, that's what Captain Davis specializes in. What does Captain Davis specialize in? Ambassador Zexthai asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be somehow even more impossible than everything else they'd learned. Intervention counseling for cosmic-scale sociopaths. It's a very specialized field. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems and the distant sound of several representatives quietly questioning their fundamental understanding of reality. Captain Foster, Counselor Lyrian said finally, what happens now? The Council has protocols, regulations, oversight requirements. Oh, you don't need to change anything, the human captain replied cheerfully. We're not asking for official recognition or support. This is just what we do. But it might be helpful if you stopped sending escorts to protect us from our patients. Some of these entities are still working on their trust issues. Ambassador Zexthai looked around the chamber at his fellow representatives, seeing his own bewilderment reflected in their faces. In a single day, their understanding of humans had shifted from viewing them as reckless mavericks to recognizing them as the galaxy's first and only species to develop therapeutic relationships with cosmic phenomena. There is one thing we could use, Captain Foster added. If any of your species have experience with large-scale family therapy, Captain Martinez could use some consultation. Turns out the binary storms aren't just married. They're part of a complex, stellar family system with some serious communication issues. As the transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence, Ambassador Zexthai realized that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their technology, their courage, or their adaptability. It was their capacity to recognize that even the vast, incomprehensible forces of the cosmos might sometimes just need someone to care about their well-being. The emergency session that had begun with concerns about human safety ended with the Galactic Council officially establishing the Department of Cosmic Psychological Welfare with a standing invitation for human captains to serve as consultants whenever they had time between their regular therapy rounds. After all, as Captain Foster had observed, the universe was a big place, and there were a lot of ancient traumas that still needed healing. The galaxy, it turned out, had been waiting 40,000 years for someone to ask how it was feeling. Fortunately, Humans had always been good listeners.